The year is 1915. The First World War has engulfed the globe and the great empires are locked in a brutal struggle. While the Western Front is mired in stalemates, an audacious plan takes shape, one that will decide the fate of the Ottoman Empire and the heart of the Islamic world. The prize? Constantinople. For centuries it stood as the jewel of empires, first as the capital of Christendom and then as the heart of the Islamic Caliphate. Its fall 5 centuries earlier was not merely the loss of a city, it was the death of a sacred bastion, the blazing flame of Eastern Christianity extinguished. Since its conquest by the Ottomans in 1453, it symbolized their unshakable power. To the west, it signaled the ascendancy of a rival faith. Its reconquest would have meant more than military triumph. It would have been a divine restoration, a legacy etched in legend, reclaiming what many believed God had once entrusted to Christendom. Now the British Empire, championed by Winston Churchill, their ambitious First Lord of the Admiralty, sets its sights on breaking the Ottomans, conquering their territories and reclaiming this historic city. This would have been a great military defeat and a symbolic and devastating blow to the Islamic world and the dying Ottoman Empire. But Britain wasn't alone in its ambitions. French forces also fought alongside them, seeking a share of Ottoman lands. Australia and New Zealand, under the Anzac banner, joined the battle in loyalty to the British Empire. Troops from India and Canada were drawn in as well, bound by colonial ties. Troops from Ireland, then under the British Empire, played a key role. Even Russia, though distant, stood to gain from the reopening of supply routes through the Dardanelles Strait to sustain its war effort. The Ottoman Empire, however, would not yield without a fight. For them, this was a battle for survival, the defence of Constantinople, the capital of their empire, and the seat of the Caliphate. The Ottomans prepared to make Gallipoli a graveyard for Allied ambitions. Standing in Churchill's way was Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, a brilliant Ottoman commander determined to defend his homeland at any cost. On the rocky shores of Gallipoli, their fates collided in one of the bloodiest and most consequential campaigns of the war, a campaign that would shatter empires, forge new nations, and alter history forever. This is the story of Churchill versus Ataturk, the bloody war to conquer the heart of the Islamic world. By 1915, the Ottoman Empire was in steep decline, often referred to as the sick man of Europe. The British had already dealt heavy blows, seizing Egypt and backing revolts in Arabia. Now they sought the decisive strike to end Ottoman rule, obtain control of the Dardanelles Strait and even capture Constantinople. The plan, masterminded by Churchill, was bold. Force a naval breakthrough at the Dardanelles, storm the Gallipoli Peninsula and march on Constantinople. This would open a supply route to Russia, knock the Ottomans out of the war and secure Britain's dominance in the Middle East. Churchill championed the plan as a masterstroke that would change the course of the war. He was the heir of 6 generations of prominent forebears, many of whom had carved their names into the annals of British military and political power. Now it was his turn to leave a legacy. He will bring the Ottoman Empire to its knees and reclaim Constantinople. In doing so, he will join the ranks of Charles Martel and the legendary defenders of the West, etched into history not as a man, but as a myth reborn. But the plan was built on overconfidence, relying on the assumption that the weak man of Europe would collapse under pressure. What he didn't account for was the determination of the Ottoman forces, or the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. While Churchill planned to dismantle the Ottoman Empire, Mustafa Kemal was preparing to defend it. A brilliant and determined commander, Kemal saw Gallipoli as more than just a battlefield. It was the gateway to the Ottoman heart. His leadership would turn the tide of the campaign. When the Allies launched their landings at Gallipoli, it was Kemal who rose to meet them. Positioned at Chunuk Bair, a critical high ground, he rallied his troops with legendary resolve, declaring, "I am not ordering you to attack, I am ordering you to die." His words galvanized his soldiers to hold their ground against overwhelming odds. Kemal's mastery of the terrain and his ability to anticipate Allied movements turned what Churchill had envisioned as a swift victory into a grueling war of attrition. His leadership ensured the defence of Gallipoli and elevated him to the status of a national hero. The Gallipoli Campaign began in February 1915 with a naval assault that would quickly spiral into one of the bloodiest and most catastrophic operations of World War I. Churchill's plan called for the Royal Navy to force its way through the narrow Dardanelles Strait, a vital waterway heavily fortified with Ottoman mines and artillery. But from the very beginning, the operation was plagued by disaster. The naval assault failed spectacularly. British and French ships, including the state-of-the-art HMS Irresistible and HMS Ocean, were sunk by Ottoman mines, while others were battered by relentless artillery fire from the shore. In a single day, the Allies lost 3 battleships, and with them, any hope of a purely naval victory. The failure forced the Allies to abandon the naval attack and shift to a far riskier strategy: a full-scale land invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula. At dawn on April 25, 1915, the Allied forces launched their amphibious assault. Thousands of British, French, Australian and New Zealand troops stormed the beaches of Gallipoli, hoping to quickly overwhelm Ottoman defences and gain control of the peninsula. What awaited them, however, was not an easy victory, but a nightmare of blood and chaos. The first wave of Anzac, that's the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps troops, landed at what would later be called Anzac Cove, only to be met with devastating Ottoman fire. Machine guns ripped through the advancing soldiers as they struggled to climb steep cliffs under relentless bombardment. Bodies piled on the sand, staining the turquoise waters red. As the boats touched the shore, hell opened. Artillery guns hidden high in the cliffs unleashed an unrelenting storm. Bullets chewed through flesh before boots could touch the sand. Soldiers fell in waves, their bodies collapsing into the surf, some never even making it off the boats. Those who did scrambled up steep, jagged slopes, only to be cut down by rifle fire, mortar blasts and the ever-present scream of artillery. The British and French forces landing at Cape Helles fared no better, facing fierce resistance from well-entrenched Ottoman troops who had the advantage of the high ground. The beach became a graveyard in real time, limbs torn, screams drowned in gunfire, and young men gasping for life as their blood soaked into the sand. The turquoise waters of the Aegean turned red and brown, swirling with death. Waves lapped against piles of corpses, as if the sea itself recoiled from the slaughter. Despite overwhelming firepower, the Allies were unable to break through the Ottoman lines. Mustafa Kemal, now commanding critical Ottoman positions, personally directed counterattacks to drive the invaders back toward the beaches. His mastery of the terrain and ability to inspire his soldiers turned what Churchill had expected to be a swift campaign into a grinding war of attrition. By May 1915, the campaign had devolved into brutal trench warfare. The once picturesque Gallipoli Peninsula became a living hell. Soldiers on both sides faced relentless artillery barrages, deadly sniper fire, and the ever-present threat of disease. Dysentery and flies tormented the men who lived in trenches filled with the stench of rotting corpses. Supplies ran low, and morale plummeted as weeks turned into months with no clear progress. The Allies launched repeated offensives, including the infamous brutal attack at Lone Pine, where the Australians charged into a storm of Ottoman gunfire, ripping apart timber barriers to break into the enemy trenches. Then followed by a savage hand-to-hand battle that turned the narrow, suffocating trenches into blood-soaked killing grounds. Soldiers grappled in the dim chaos, stabbing wildly with bayonets and slashing with knives. Rifle butts shattered skulls, grenades exploded at close quarters, and fists hammered in desperation. The walls of the trenches ran slick with blood as men fought and fell in heaps, bodies piling atop one another. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood, the screams of the wounded, and the choking smoke of gunfire. For days, both sides launched counterattacks, dragging the dead aside to clear space for more slaughter. In the end, the Australians held the trenches, but at a staggering cost. Over 2,000 Australians and nearly 7,000 Ottomans killed or wounded. And then came the doomed assault on Chunuk-Bair. The attack was a brutal uphill struggle through steep, rugged terrain under relentless Ottoman fire. Shells rained down, tearing men apart, while machine guns shredded entire ranks. The climb became a massacre before the summit was even reached. Those who made it to the ridge found no victory, only hand-to-hand slaughter. Bayonets plunged into flesh, rifle butts crushed skulls, and fists and knives met in vicious, desperate combat. The narrow ridges were strewn with bodies, the dirt soaked with blood, as soldiers fought in the choking stench of death. Ottoman reinforcements, led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, counterattacked with ferocious precision, driving the invaders back amid the chaos. The cost of the assault was staggering. The Allies suffered over 6,000 casualties, with entire battalions annihilated, while the Ottomans lost around 9,000 soldiers in their relentless defense. Çanakkale remained firmly in Ottoman hands, and the battle became a grim testament to the unrelenting carnage of Gallipoli, where every inch of ground was paid for in rivers of blood. Each assault cost thousands of lives, but gained nothing but more misery and death. For the soldiers, it was a meat grinder, and for the commanders it became a futile exercise in desperation. After 8 months of unrelenting combat, the campaign ended in failure. By December 1915, the Allies had no choice but to evacuate their forces, marking one of the greatest military defeats of World War I. The human cost was staggering. The Allies suffered over 250,000 casualties, with nearly 46,000 dead, including thousands of Australians and New Zealanders whose sacrifices would forever shape the national identities of their young nations. The Ottomans, under Atatürk's leadership, also paid a heavy price, with over 300,000 casualties, including 86,000 dead. Yet, for them, the campaign was a triumphant defense of their homeland and the city that symbolized their empire. For the soldiers who survived, the memories of Gallipoli would remain seared into their minds, a place of unimaginable suffering, sacrifice, and heroism. Among the fallen in Gallipoli were thousands of Australians and New Zealanders whose sacrifice gave rise to the legend of the Anzac Spirit, commemorated each year on Anzac Day. For Britain and France, the campaign was a brutal reminder of the cost of underestimating their enemies and the perils of over-ambition. For Winston Churchill, the Gallipoli Campaign was a personal disaster. As the First Lord of the Admiralty, he had been the chief architect of the plan, and its failure placed him squarely in the crosshairs of public and political anger. Critics accused him of recklessness, arrogance, and a disregard for human life. By May 1915, Churchill was forced to resign from his post and take a lower-profile position. His reputation was shattered, and he spent the following months in political exile, even serving briefly on the Western Front to rehabilitate his image. Gallipoli, though a humbling defeat, was not the end of his story. The lessons he learned from the campaign, particularly the importance of planning and execution, would shape his leadership during World War II, when he would once again be called upon to lead Britain through a time of unprecedented crisis. For the Ottoman Empire, though Gallipoli was a rare moment of triumph during a war that had otherwise brought disasters, victory came at an equally heavy cost, with 300,000 casualties. Though the empire would continue its decline and ultimately dissolve after World War I, the defense of Gallipoli became a powerful symbol of resilience and national pride. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the architect of this victory, emerged as a hero and a unifying figure in a fractured empire. His leadership at Gallipoli not only secured his place in Ottoman history, but also set the stage for his rise to power as the founder of modern Turkey. Gallipoli was more than a victory for the Ottomans. It was a spiritual and symbolic defense of Constantinople, the heart of the Islamic world. While the empire would lose its territories in the Middle East and North Africa, Istanbul remained, and its survival became a rallying cry for the forces of Turkish nationalism led by Atatürk. Gallipoli also reshaped the Islamic world. It delayed the fall of the Ottoman Empire and preserved Constantinople as the heart of Turkey. For the Allied nations, particularly Australia and New Zealand, the sacrifices of Gallipoli became central to their national identities, remembered every year on Anzac Day. But the scars of the campaign remain, a reminder of the cost of ambition and the resilience of those who defended their homeland. Though Gallipoli failed to break the Ottoman Empire, it had far-reaching consequences for the global order. The British and French, undeterred by their defeat, would turn to other means of dismantling Ottoman control. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, signed in secret during the war, carved up Ottoman territories in the Middle East between Britain and France, setting the stage for decades of conflict and reshaping the Islamic world. Do you think the Allies underestimated the Ottomans, or was Gallipoli doomed by poor planning? Could Churchill's plan have worked, or was it destined for failure? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more untold stories from history.